isn't it? What could I put out that's seasonally appropriate for my tens of viewers around the world, and that's in the spirit of the Historian at the same time? Can't make it too exciting now. I am the Historian after all. So let's avoid exciting. Let's go for just a kind of interesting kind of a vibe, you know? Maybe this could be a good wind-down video for Christmas Day. You got a bit overexcited, you've drunk too much fizzy pop, you need to take it easy, put this video on. You know, that maybe I could serve a very important role Christmas Day for you. Well, I thought, you know, what in particular could it be then? I just thought, well, it'd be a nice opportunity to look at some pictures. So what I present for Christmas 2024 is Christmas in Pictures. We're going to look at pictures covering the nativity story to start with, and roughly trying to go forward in time with the pictures as I go. And then pictures of that ever-present and very visual figure of Christmas, Santa. So our first picture of a work of art, a statue, is this statue here of Caesar Augustus. We start the story in the reign of Augustus, who institutes a census in the prefecture of Syria, where our story happens. Here is Caesar Augustus, and this was made during his lifetime or not long after his death. Caesar Augustus, he's the head honcho, the big boss, before Bruce Lee was the big boss. He is in charge of the known world. Augustus is the name he took when he became emperor. His real name was Octavian. Augustus means the illustrious one. So he's dropping a very big hint to everybody in the empire how he expects to be treated. Augustus's adoptive father, Julius Caesar, had turned Rome upside down. He'd had enough power in his military commands to become dictator for life of Rome and its territories around the world, completely diluting the Republic, which was the system of rule that Rome had. People thought that once Augustus inherited that role, he would gradually put the Republic back in place, but he could never bring himself to do that. What he did instead was to do things to make Imperial Rome a place that Romans wanted to live in, you know, like kind of good PR for the empire rather than bring down the empire. He brought in a lot of reforms, especially reforms to make the wealthy and powerful classes behave accountably and not take advantage over humbler Romans. He tried to instill more moral and honourable behaviour befitting their position and breeding. Outside Rome, in the empire though, in general he didn't insist people behave in a certain way, but he did do things to keep things ordered. There is quite a peaceful period under the influence of Augustus called the Pax Romana, the Peace of Rome. The mortar starts wearing away as soon as Augustus dies, but enough is still in place to aid the growth of the early church from about 30 years later. Okay, lovely jolly image coming up next. Merry Christmas everybody. The Slaughter of the Innocents. This picture is by Giotto, and he painted that in 1305. One of the ways that Augustus had focused on order but minimal interference in the empire was the installation of local people as kings in regions where this was appropriate and for as long as the local king behaved appropriately. In the province of Judea, this local king was an Edomite from the country to the south of Judah, Edom, and he's called Herod the Great, or he's remembered as Herod the Great. We know from historical records outside the Bible that Herod was a very paranoid man. He killed people who he thought might threaten his rule, and this extended to his own wife and sons. His paranoia was fueled further by prophecies that the prophet Daniel had given to the Jews nearly 500 years ago, that a special ruler called Messiah would appear. Herod needed no excuse to be jumpy, and as we've seen, would have had no qualms about having babies and toddlers killed, having been prepared to dispatch people in his own family, the babies and toddlers of strangers he'd have no issue with whatsoever. This isn't the kind of thing Augustus was likely to interfere with unless it was seen to disrupt the political order. It's within Rome itself that Augustus was concerned about the morality of people's actions. Okay, next picture. Two pictures. We've got the young John the Baptist, come back to him in a few minutes, and we've got John the Baptist's family, his parents, Zechariah and Elizabeth. So a high priest called Zechariah is visited by an angel who tells him he's going to be a father. This is very unexpected because both he and his wife Elizabeth were advanced in years and thus far they hadn't conceived. Being a high priest, Zechariah would have been under a lot of pressure for many years to ensure that he produced an heir, because high priest is a hereditary role. The pressure would have included pressure to divorce Elizabeth. In this time, failure to conceive was always blamed on the woman. I could explain why, but I won't bore you, it's Christmas. And divorcing a woman was very easy to do for a man. Divorcing a man was completely impossible for a woman to do. But Zechariah didn't do those things. He stuck by his wife, and God honoured that. For disbelieving and being rather flippant about the announcement, however, Zechariah had his ability to speak taken from him until the time that his son was born. This experience seems to have taught him obedience, because when he gets his voice back, he names his son John, as he's been instructed, instead of most likely Zechariah, which he would have called him otherwise. So this John is John the Baptist, and he's the second cousin to the lady we're going to meet next, Mary. But we're not quite ready for Mary because I think there's an elephant in the room to address, but it's not an elephant, it's a sheep. Why is the young John here holding a sheep? There was a custom in Western art since early medieval times to show saints with objects that gave you the clue to which saint they were. Most people couldn't read, so you needed visual clues, and there were a lot of saints. St. Peter carried keys. That was the object that told you this man in this painting is St. Peter. St. Sebastian carried arrows because he'd been martyred by being shot at with lots of arrows. I feel a bit sorry for St. Sebastian that he had to be reminded of that all the time. John famously announces, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the people." So he has to carry a lamb around, even when he's a toddler, because especially when he's a little one like this, you're not going to work out he's John the Baptist unless he's got a lamb with him. Medieval people look at that and say, oh yeah, John the Baptist. So that's the reason he is holding a sheep. Okay, next picture. An important event that we normally call the Annunciation. And I used this painting, I like this painting, I used it in a previous video and wrongly told you that it was by Fra Angelico. It was actually by an unknown Italian painter in about 1430. So a contemporary of Fra Angelico, but not Fra Angelico. Apologies for my error. Mary is a young woman, a girl, very possibly, from a humble family. Although, if the last 200 years had gone differently, she would have been part of the royal household. So, also would have been the man that she's betrothed to marry, Joseph, who is a carpenter. And they both live up north in a town called Nazareth. The angel Gabriel comes to Mary and tells her that she will bear a son who will be conceived by the Holy Spirit, which is actually happening in this painting. Can you see? Coming down through the ceiling here, Mary's being zapped through something that's broken off through the ceiling. That is the Holy Spirit conceiving Christ. So actually, simultaneously to being told it's about to happen, it's happening. Which is, you know, a thing that I think that we still expect to see in paintings. We understand why. Actually, this painting is full of wonderful anachronisms. We've got a very European-looking Mary. She's dressed as a medieval noblewoman, not a first century peasant. There's a lectern here, and Mary's holding a book, a prayer book or a psalter, I think is what we're meant to assume. And these are indications to show that, you know, she's pious. So somehow she's already in a church before the birth of the church. Okay, certainly it's an anachronism. Seems a bit crazy to us once we realise that. We wouldn't put up with anachronisms like that these days, obviously. Or would we? Because here's a picture I'm going to put up now. This is from the Flintstones Christmas special, only back in the 1960s. The Flintstones family here are celebrating the festival of the birth of Christ thousands of years before the birth of Christ. So actually, we do still get anachronisms like this in popular culture today. These types of anachronisms are very typical of medieval and Renaissance painting, and there's normally a logic behind them. A medieval logic, but a logic. I did a video on anachronisms earlier this year. It was way too long, so I took it off. Maybe I'll do it again, because it is quite a good subject. Okay, next picture. Three people who come to witness the birth of Jesus are three men called the Magi. Some men in the East who studied the stars are able to work out the birth of an important child was about to occur, and where? Through studying the stars. Please don't ask me how they did that. I've not got the foggiest idea. We normally call them the Magi, which means wise or learned people. They certainly are if they can work something like that out. The best explanation I've heard is that they're also Jews, but they live in cities of the old empires. For instance, the city of Babylon could be a very likely place they come from. Many dispersed Jews from the previous centuries stayed in the lands that they got dispersed into by the Assyrians, who broke apart the northern kingdom of Israel, and the Neo-Babylonians, who broke apart the southern kingdom of Judah. A lot of people stayed, that's where they made their home, but they continued to be Jews. I actually wonder if these figures were more understood in their time to be representatives of Daniel, who had prophesied the coming of Christ, so important witness in that sense, and he's also a Magi of his day who lived in the city of Babylon. My theory. Okay, I can't really say any more than that at the moment. And if I did, then that wouldn't be very Christmassy, and I'd be tipping over from, that's interesting, to, so we're not going there. Okay. At some point, the idea of them being kings emerged. Certainly, there's the carol, We Three Kings. We still sing. It's a good one, that, actually. I like the tune. They weren't kings, but they were important enough to reside at palaces on their journey. So they're important guys. They stop in at Herod the Great, who would have been a stop along the way. They seem to attain the measure of Herod on their visit and don't return to tell them where baby Jesus is staying. When people are seriously unhinged, it doesn't take very long in a normal conversation to start spotting that, and these are wise men. But just in case they also needed the help, they also get a dream that tells them, don't go back to Herod. I thought it'd be nice to move forward in time with our paintings. So this painting's from quite a bit further on in time. This is the Adoration of the Magi, which was painted by the pre-Raphaelite painter, Edward Burne-Jones. He painted that in 1861. Hopefully you've been admiring it while I've been waffling. Giving you interesting information. Okay, so next picture. The Shepherds. Now this painting may well look like a modern 20th century painting, but that's just El Greco for you, a unique innovator. It's actually from the early 17th century. I think he catches something about the specialness and excitement of the occasion. Sometimes these scenes can be a bit too solemn, and you can understand why. Solemnity wants to be put in a picture, but solemnity tends to drive out the excitement. There must have been excitement in this image, and El Greco manages to maintain that. Also, these men are quite believable as shepherds. They're rugged, ordinary working men. They look like that, you know? It's a telling thing. Who were the first people in all the world to be told about the coming of Christ? A young woman, a carpenter, some shepherds. Carpentry and shepherding were vital jobs in that time, but they didn't carry any prestige. The king of the region only finds out because the Magi tell him. The Magi don't have it announced, they figure it out. Augustus, the king of the world, may never have heard about him. And the next emperor, Tiberius, did, but he was way down the queue, a long time later. The people who God chooses to announce the coming of this king of the world are a young woman, a carpenter, and some shepherds. During the resurrection too, a group of women are the first people to see Jesus. Again, normal women, not viewed as people of note in their time, sadly. Not my view, please understand that. Okay, so next one. Next picture, the flight to Egypt. So returning to Nazareth would mean travelling a long way through territory that was run by Herod the Great. Once you're in Bethlehem, though, you're much closer to the border of another country that's not under the jurisdiction of Herod, Egypt. Another advantage of Egypt is that it doesn't have a local monarch, but it has a Roman governor who would have no interest in collaborating with Herod. Probably Egypt's most famous monarch was its last, Cleopatra VII, the last queen of Egypt. Egypt had supported Mark Antony against Octavian, when he was still Octavian, not Augustus yet. So Egypt was put under strictly Roman governorship by Augustus's people. It was also the vital grain supply for the whole empire, so there was no messing around when it came to Egypt. Let's get Augustus's best men on the job, and they'd have been men on the job. This painting by Jean-Léon Gérôme is quite imaginative. It's got an angel guiding Joseph and Mary through the desert. And they're wonderful features of a romantic painting, of course, and I think a very nice landscape in the background. That's what appeals to me. In reality, they probably just knew the way, and they took a main road that takes you from Judah into Egypt. But it does make a more interesting painting that they're kind of going through the desert, and an angel leads them through there. I understand that. An amusing aside for you, when I went on Google to try and find this image, I got a lot of airline companies coming up because Google thought I wanted to book a flight to Egypt. I wish. Okay, so we're going to finish with a nice crib scene. This is from the 21st century. It's painted by Krystyna Yarmolinsky. I especially like this painting because it focuses in on the family aspect. It's zooming in on these three key characters, and it's zooming in on what really the core strength of all this is. This story involves so much courageous, heroic behaviour. How's that possible? What makes that happen? Really, the core of that, the strength of it, is exactly this. What you find in family. In devotion and commitment to each other. The kind of love where you're just going to bear so much for the sake of the love of another person. This is absolutely at the core. This is the true strength. And this is why I like this painting. I think it shows you exactly that. Although overlooked in their world, God chose Mary and Joseph because they were strong in exactly these ways. We get told what strength means in the world's terms, but what really is strong? That question, I think, is asked by a painting like this. It also shows what's so strong about art itself. No painter has to tell everything in a single picture. This isn't a kind of elaborate tableau that tries to integrate every single kind of visual cue of the nativity story within it. It zooms in on one of the core important elements. That's something that art can do. Many painters can bring out the many different aspects, and we can look at lots of paintings to discover that whole in a much deeper way. That's a unique, remarkable human ability. My sort of advert for art at Christmas there, okay? Okay, so another big visual character of Christmas is the fellow we call various names, including Santa Claus and Father Christmas. Now, I'm just going to concentrate on Santa in illustrations in this video now. These illustrations are only from the 19th century onwards, because that's when one single figure emerges. Although the origin was normally the sainted priest of 4th century Turkey, St. Nicholas, there had been various different characters appearing in the folklore of basically each different European country. It's only in the 19th century, when culture begins to globalise and much more of its consumption is visual, that a single standard figure begins to emerge. Even in the late 19th century, there was still understood to be a distinction between Father Christmas from England and Santa Claus from America via the Dutch. But these two have also merged into a single figure since then. Here are some Victorian illustrations of Father Christmas, who you see has most of the features that we recognise. Old man, big beard, delivering presents, and he's jolly. What's different to our eyes, and we probably notice straight away, is that Father Christmas can wear different colours. As far as we're concerned now, he can't wear different colours, he wears red. We certainly think of him now always wearing red. That standardisation occurred in the early 20th century. There's an urban myth, quite a popular one, that says that this was the sole work of the Coca-Cola company. Well, they probably contributed to it. It's likely to be a wider factor of advertising. Posters and magazine advertisements were in colour for a lot longer than film. That wasn't starting to be shown in colour until the 1930s. There are exceptions in little pockets of culture to this day. I went to a Newcastle United football game around Christmas time a few years ago, and it was played at their home ground, St James's Park. I saw a sea of black and white Santa hats all around me. Why not red and white? Because red and white are the colours of their rivals, Sunderland, so Newcastle fans refused to wear them. Okay, so we're going to our illustrations now. Here's a first edition illustration of Santa from the 1823 poem, A Visit from St Nicholas, but that we are more likely to know by its famous first line, "'Twas the night before Christmas." That poem's written by Clement Clarke Moore. The illustration featured here is by a very famous illustrator from this period of time, Jessie Wilcox Smith, and she's from a later period of time because this edition came out in 1912. L. Frank Baum wrote The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus in 1902, which featured these illustrations, you can see here, by Mary Cowles Clarke. Father Christmas later appears in Baum's short stories set in the Land of Oz, which we know him most famously for, his books in the Land of Oz, and later on in the novel The Road to Oz from the year 1909. This man is better remembered as a unique writer, but was also a unique illustrator. J.R.R. Tolkien wrote letters from Father Christmas to his children every year, which included these wonderful watercolour and ink illustrations. They show the adventures that Father Christmas and his friend the polar bear get up to through the course of the year. In this one, Father Christmas, in this particular year, has been given the responsibility for the Northern Lights. And this beautiful depiction of the Northern Lights is an illustration of that event in his life. Now, Father Christmas is as entitled as everyone else to be a bit grumpy now and again. And it doesn't stop him being a lovely guy. That's the Father Christmas you see illustrated by Raymond Briggs. Here he is. I have personal, joyful memories reading about Father Christmas doing his important day's work, and another story by Briggs where he takes a holiday. I still watch the 1980s animated film of his book The Snowman every year to help me feel more Christmassy and to sort of re-enter the Christmas magic, just like I did when I was a boy. And I still have to hold back the tears every time. The Snowman, both the book and animated film, completely convey the story without any written or spoken words. So I guess that's interesting to me as well, because it shows how strong the image is, how much you can communicate through images. Strangely, even though it didn't need it, the animated film had an introduction by the boy in the story who had grown up. And when I watched it, he was played by none other than David Bowie, who at that time I don't think I knew was a rock star. I just knew he was this guy who was at the beginning of The Snowman. You know, I was quite a young kid then. Being a child at that time that I was in Britain was a bit of a confusing time, actually, because rock stars were popping up in children's stuff all the time. And kids like me didn't even know there were rock stars yet. I remember looking at the cover of the Sgt. Pepper album, which is an iconic piece of art history itself, and asking my dad who the four blokes in the middle were. He said, "That's Paul McCartney." "What? Paul McCartney? The Frog Chorus guy?" "Yeah." "And this guy? That's Ringo Starr." "Ringo Starr? The Thomas the Tank Engine guy? Come on, Dad, be serious." He was being serious. yeah, my mind was blown. They were confusing times. And that kind of makes me think perhaps for next Christmas, what I'll look at is animated Christmas specials, because that's another thing that I certainly have some favourites of, which I anyway would be interested by and might inflict my interest upon others, which I'll be doing right the way through the year. Don't worry about that. So yeah, that was Christmas in Pictures. I hope you were stimulated by it. I won't say enjoyed it because that's going too far. Yeah, and thanks so much. I hope that was Christmassy for you in a suitably historian kind of a way. Just want to take this opportunity to say thank you for watching my videos over this last year. New ones will be on the way soon. Thank you also actually for making me feel more Christmassy by the whole process of putting this video together. I definitely, a bit more Christmas has kind of entered into me now. And I needed it because, as you can see, I haven't even put the tree up yet. But I'll do it today, okay? Certainly. You've convinced me, you've shown me the error of my ways. Thank you again. I just have a brilliant Christmas and have really great days until I see you again. Thanks so much for watching me all the way through the year. Merry Christmas to you all. Goodbye.